Welcome to Between the Cracks, the podcast where we do casual conversations around tea. My name is Dart Alonge, and today I'm joined by Derek.
Hello. It's Derek from Wonder Tea and the other half of Tao Teaware.
Yeah, buddy. So, in the warehouse starting today, we have 3 new items that we're dropping this week. We have 2 pieces of teaware and a tea.
Oh, man, I'm so excited for these. I almost forgot we were dropping them.
Yeah, so I actually have all 3 of them here with me. So we have the kegger, we have the Gadsby, and then the Moonstone white tea cake as well. Which should we talk about first?
Just beautiful. I mean, I love the kegger, and I just love the name, too, and the art we did for it.
Yeah. I'm really excited for us having those arts in general and the stickers coming on the way so that there's like a cohesion between like the cool names and the cool art that goes with them.
Right. It would be so cool if people could see the artwork before we release the piece, right? And so get that teasing going on.
Oh, a little bit of foreshadowing as always.
The kegger, how big is that? It looks enormous.
I think it's 180. I want to say it's 180 or 185 mils. So good for like a 3-person session. I'd say probably best. But I mean, really, you could do yourself or up to 4.
Right. I mean, finally a party pot, right? I think we've been going a little too small.
For sure. Yeah, we've hung out in the like 130 to 160 range. Let's get out of that.
I mean, it's pretty good if all you're drinking is by yourself or with one or two other people.
No, that's true.
But you went to a few festivals, and like at a festival, a tiny 100 milliliter pot, like, ooh. You got to put it through its paces.
Yeah, it's been a struggle at the festivals for sure. It's also why we have the new bigger gaiwans on the way, those 150 or 200 mil gaiwans, just because, yeah, like a 100 milliliter pot is just, it's almost impossible to service a table of 6 and like get everyone consistent tea for sure.
And this pot comes from the studio we both went to in Yixing, right?
Yeah, this was a fun studio.
Yeah, I love that studio with so many different styles, and one thing that we really gravitated towards were like these easy to open pots with just huge lids.
And the fact that we could actually do a pour test. I know that it seems like, I don't know, maybe a little bit silly, but it was like one of the only studios that we could do pour tests at in Yixing.
I mean, they had it set up for pour tests. It's like, okay, you know your business. This is what you want to do. You want to feel if it clugs or not. Is that the right word? Clug?
Yeah, chug, clug. I mean, whatever.
If
Does it give you the tingles?
It doesn't give me the tingles, the word clug. But it's like if you really do any of these pour tests, if you're really into like the teapots, you'll know what it means. Like you have this resistance when you're pouring out the tea, or other than like a easy glass rod cannon flow.
Do you ever see? I was down hanging out with Sohan, and he was talking about how like when he was in Fuding last time, he saw them like double brewing the white teas a lot. Do you see that when you're there?
What do you mean double brewing?
Like putting them into the gongdao bei. And then pouring them back into the pot and then like brewing them again.
No, I didn't see that very much, no. I feel like that's like, ooh, I messed up.
Yeah, I don't know. It was actually Steve, not Sohan. But yeah, he was saying last time he was there, they were doing that. And I was like,
Yeah, I feel like I would do that if the water was too cool or if I didn't steep it long enough. I pour it out and I'm like, oh boy, I got to re-steep that.
I love this tea so much. I'm so happy that a white tea was the first one that we got pressed into a cake.
Well, we also had the coins pressed from Linsang, the shengpuer and the shupuer.
That's true. And I do love those, but I like the fact that we have more tea in the cakes. Like, it's just, like, when people ask for tea.
Yeah, I mean, a cake is a lot to dig into, and you can kind of grow with the cake as well.
I'm also really excited for the Gadsby. This piece is really cool just because it's not a handmade piece, but it has a pour that's more similar to a handmade piece. And that's one of those things of, like, having the right price point with every, like, style of teaware.
Yeah, and it's definitely much more elegant than a lot of the other gongdao beis I've seen around. It's just very simple. It's got that Riao glaze, feels soft, and yeah, we call it the Gadsby just because it feels great like that.
Nice and elegant. Well, if you like any of these, if you like the kegger, if you like the Gadsby, or you're interested in the Moonstone, you can go check out our full video right here on that. But those will all be available at the end of the week on our website. But today's main topic is how you drink tea.
Interesting. I was actually planning on doing a podcast on this for tea soup, how I drink dan song.
Well, we may have a different definition of tea. So last week, Derek was really excited because we got to talk about the top 10 Chinese teas. But today we're going to talk about 4 or 5 different types of tea that Derek probably would never drink.
I'm afraid to ask.
So we'll at least start in Taiwan. And what is the most famous tea to come out of Taiwan, Derek?
The milk oolong?
The milk oolong, or milk tea or boba tea, which started in the 1980s.
Tell me about it.
I have a proposition, right? Because we know the gongdao bei came from Taiwan. In researching the kind of back and forth of China and Taiwan and the tea culture shared between the two, I feel like really every single addition to tea adds to the full tea culture and helps to seep back into Gongfu tea. And that's kind of what I want to posit today when we're talking about these teas that you wouldn't normally drink.
So you're going to bring milk tea back into the fold of Gongfu cha.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's do it.
No.
Go for it.
No. Just rather that there's an inner connection, and like the more tea that people are drinking, the more we get into the different levels and depths, because tea is the second most drink in the world, but what percentage of those people are actually drinking Gongfu style tea?
Right. It's definitely very much a Chinese thing, that Gongfu style tea.
Or, I mean, even let's just say small pot in general to encompass the American, Japanese, and Korean styles as well.
Is American tea culture small pot culture?
I meant the segment of like American tea culture where they're making small pots, because I know there are a lot of the potters here in the U.S. that don't say they make Gongfu pots because they don't have that connection like to the direct lineage in China. So small pot is just easier because it can encompass everyone without like putting the pressure of being a Chinese style.
But what we're trying to do is look at tea outside of the pot, outside of the small pot culture.
Right. Outside of small pot culture, exactly.
Okay, so we'll start with milk tea. Does that encompass some of the milk tea drank in England?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, do we consider leaf tea with milk added? I think for this conversation, yes, but I don't know if I would group it under like the boba or milk tea grouping.
So what about chai? What about masala chai in India and Bangladesh?
Yeah, I just had somebody who was messaging me about that earlier in the week. I don't know a ton about it, but from what I have seen, there are some masala chais that use Camellia sinensis plants, but a lot of them are obviously cut with other things. I'd be interested. Do you have more on that backstory? Because I don't know a ton about it. It was just something that I actually came up for me this week.
Right. Well, I believe masala just means a mix of spices, and so you have different types of blends of the masala, and then you add it with the chai, which means tea, and then blend it with milk as well. And so if we're talking about milk tea in Taiwan, which is just sugar, tea, milk, and then some other like sugars and stuff like that, like caramel sugars, chocolate syrup and stuff like that, it seems not a far stretch to be like, well, these are same things expressed differently.
What defines a tea like for you? Does it have to be pure whole leaf with nothing added, or would you still consider those things with things added still tea?
It's a very tricky question, just a matter of semantics. It depends on what I'm feeling at the moment when you ask me that question. Drink herbal medicine, like Chinese herbal medicine, which is definitely Chinese teas, like medicinal herbs in America. I used to brew beer, which is just like making tea out of barley, malted barley.
And I think that gets to a point too, because the coffee festival here in Wilmington was one of the biggest events that we had this year, and it's not because there were so much as tea lovers as much as craft drink lovers. So there was more of an overlap because of being a craft drink rather than because of a connection to tea.
That's interesting. Would you consider the milk tea in Taiwan to be a craft drink?
No, I would consider, what do we name that? What do we call that?
A beverage, a milk tea beverage, a tea beverage. Not tea.
Yeah. See, you can't say not tea. That's not fair. It's not fair. I'm fine with tea beverage. I'm fine with tea beverage. I feel like that still does it a good service. But I think one of the issues that people run into, and it really turns them off sometimes, is when we say things are not tea, it's insulting to them because that's their experience and what their experience has been with tea. And I feel like we shouldn't invalidate that just because there's a higher quality or like more pure version of it.
So what are you talking about? Are you talking about anything that can be infused in water, or are you talking about Chinese tea?
What about like the Darjeeling implants, right? Those went over to India in the 1840s. Are those still good because they're still Camellia sinensis, or because they've been uprooted? Are they not?
Right. It's not like a champagne quite thing, but I think tea in general is, as long as it's in the same general family of plants, it's probably safe enough to call it tea. But also there's like tea tree oil, right? And so there are a lot of these ancient tea trees that are not actually made and grown for their leaves, but for their oil. And if you try and brew that, it's terrible.
So it's interesting that you mentioned ancient, because the next one that I have here is in fact ancient, and it goes as far back as the Tang Dynasty, those fruit teas. Now, oftentimes we associate them with boba or milk tea, but I don't know. What do you have to say about that?
Liu Yu was drinking fruit?
No. But he talks about how they were scenting and adding things to the teas and like adding different fruits and whatnot. So we're getting this combination of like fruit mixed with a whole leaf tea, which is oftentimes what fruit tea is today.
I thought he was talking more about vegetables being added, like onions and salt and sugars and stuff. But I guess it brings up the point that the tea of his time was a mix of different vegetables and things growing around, not just one single leaf. And again, I mean, there is precedent to make stew out of anything, right? Soup goes back as far as humanity, right?
It's really just tea soup.
That sounds familiar.
I don't know. That might be copyrighted. I don't know if I can say that on here.
Yeah, we'll bleep it out.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, Derek hosts a podcast called Tea Soup, where he takes a much more technical approach to talking about all of the different loose leaf whole teas in China. And I'll put a link right here if you want to go check that out.
Yeah, it's usually just me, though, so you miss out on this fun banter.
But in all seriousness, I think there is a distinction between, and like even the different levels of fruit and milk tea, right? Like the local boba shop here in Wilmington doesn't actually use any tea in their boba at all. Whereas like if we went to a cocoa in China, they're still using whole leaf tea and mixing it with something.
Are they using whole leaf tea or are they using powder?
I don't think, I'm almost positive cocoa uses, if not cocoa, I have been to the more boutique shops that are using like actual whole leaf. Does that matter? Does it matter like if it's a whole leaf tea with some mango juice added? What is that?
A tea beverage.
Tea beverage.
Again, it's tea with stuff with an added word, the word beverage, the added sugar, the added milk, the added fruit, tea, and something else. Yeah.
What if you add sugar, does that automatically make it a tea beverage and not tea?
I would say yeah. I'd say you're changing it, intrinsically changing it. I guess though, if I were to say boiled potatoes, would you add salt to that? Probably. Would you add spices? Maybe. So I guess it's like boiled peanuts, boiled leaf. I guess maybe I'm being too dramatic here.
And if you really think about it, tea is one of the only things that when we get higher quality, we think of changing it less, right? Like if you think of a high quality steak, you're not going to not season it. You're not going to put A1 on it, but you're not going to not season it.
Sorry, the double negative there. You're not going to not season it, but you're not
you're not going to not.
I was like, okay, which are we doing? Which aren't we doing? I was like, yeah, you don't put A1 on a nice steak, but for a nice steak, I just do salt and pepper, like not very dramatic seasoning.
But if you go to like a higher end like fine dining restaurant, they're still gonna have like a complimentary sauce. Like it's drizzled, right? It doesn't saturate and completely take over the whole flavor, but it is definitely. There are definitely additives to enhance the flavor.
So without going too far down into an alcohol tangent here, think about like fine wine or fine whiskeys, right? Like for a fine whiskey, you're not going to change like, oh, it's like a really nice old bottle of whiskey and you put a little bit of Coca-Cola in there. And you're like, it's a whiskey Coke. It's not just whiskey, right?
But again, you do also add complementary foods to nice wines that actually help to enhance the flavor of the wine. So I think it's more of, are you enhancing or detracting from the original thing that really is more the question than if you're adding anything.
Right, but you're not putting the food into the wine.
Not for wine, no. Not for wine.
Yeah. So I guess wine is a finished product where tea leaves a lot for you to complete. Which is why one of the reasons I absolutely love tea is because you kind of have the driver's seat for a lot of the teas that you're drinking.
And coffee, right? There are a lot of higher, I mean, I don't even know all the different combinations and names, but like really it's percentages of cream, coffee, and sugar or whatever else that define... and water that define all these like specialty coffees. And we wouldn't say those are low quality, even though they have added different things to the coffee.
Though we've given them totally different names. It's not just coffee, it's a macchiato. Literally means dirty milk.
All right, way to take the worst example or best example for your point, I guess.
Am I winning this argument yet?
I don't know. Like, but would you say a latte isn't coffee? I don't think people walk around and like, well, a latte is not coffee, it's a latte.
I'm convinced that latte is just boiled milk, froth milk, no coffee.
I mean, do you think people walk around saying like espresso isn't coffee?
Espresso is purely coffee, though. a latte is literally just milk, right? Am I wrong here?
No, isn't a latte the one where they add hot cocoa, or is that?
I think that's hot cocoa and milk.
No. One of the specialty coffee drinks has hot cocoa in it. I don't remember which one though, because I don't know anything about coffee.
Okay. Well, let's get out of this deep water then, because people do know a lot about coffee, and they're probably watching us right now.
If you do know anything about coffee, can you please let me know that I'm right and tell Derek that there is a specialty coffee drink with hot cocoa in it?
And is it that coffee drink that's poured over ice cream or not? I forget the name of it.
It's got a French name.
I forget about it.
Yeah, I can't remember. Okay, so you're still saying tea beverage. Why does it matter that we make the distinction for you? Like, why not just say tea and then have subgroups of tea that are different things?
Yeah, I guess probably because I'm in the industry, because I'm selling tea, because I'm drinking tea every day. And when I talk about tea, people don't know what I'm talking about and say like, no, it's really just tea. And they're like, oh, like, like milk tea? And I'm like, nope, just tea. And they're like, oh, like, do you add sugar to it? I'm like, no, it's just tea. And I'm like, how much more can I say, like, it's just tea?
It makes me think, though, because a lot of times now for the base of milk teas, there'll be an oolong. And
Right.
if people have only drank tea in the West, like let's say like Arizona, for example, they've only had green and black or hongcha, right? We're still adding vocabulary, but I see what you're saying about how it makes it difficult because people try to associate it with something and they don't really have a good association. So is that the main thing for you? That people, when you say tea, they don't really understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's the association that I'm kind of trying to get away from. Is that I want to distance, actual pure tea with all of these tea beverages.
Pure tea or whole leaf tea or loose leaf tea, not actual tea.
Right. Yeah. See, I've had to add something there.
We've seen the phrasing slow tea tossed around a lot, right? Referring to gongfu tea, a tea of experience rather than a drink or a beverage. What if we did that? What if we called it slow tea and fast tea versus real tea and fake tea or real tea and tea beverages?
Yeah, it's probably more encompassing. And then milk tea, like the Taiwanese milk tea, which one would that fall into?
Fast tea.
Okay, and then like the Indian masala chai, or like the Pakistani tea ceremony where they sit around for hours and drink this tea.
And this is where, for me, I feel like the distinction should be made.
Yeah.
Is it an experience? And we can't say ceremony because like the Japanese tea ceremony is very different than the expression of the experience of drinking gongfu style tea. But for me, I feel like slow teas should really be teas that are experience, and fast teas should be teas that are consumed as a beverage.
Yeah, because I know some places in China that they make instant tea, like powdered tea that you can just put into hot water from pu'er, from like really nice, like here's a Baihao Inggen powdered tea, and it's like,
Right.
that's fast tea. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually a really good point. As the tea industry grows, we'll have more of these quote-unquote real teas that are turned into other things, right? And so when you get a pu'er that's now in a latte or some other kind of specialty drink, it's more confusing if it's like, well, it's not real tea because now it's added something to it. And it's like, well, yeah, but pu'er is a pure tea or a loose tea or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's my whole war of education and just enlightening people on what exactly tea is, because like I sell, this Dansong oolong tea called Yashishang. Yashishang, the translation is duck poop
Duck
fragrance.
shit fragrance. Yeah.
Can we curse on here? Duck shit. This is duck shit fragrance.
It's the only swear word you hear on our podcast is referring to the duck shit oolong.
I see in Chaozhou and the rest of the China now, like duck shit lattes, duck shit milk tea, duck shit lemon tea, and the base of it is this duck shit oolong from Chaozhou. And it just has this really interesting name that it grabs people's attention. They want to try it. And then
Yeah.
people like will come full circle and they'll be like, Derek, you sell tea. Have you ever had this like duck shit milk tea? And I'm like, yes, I sell the duck shit oolong that's based on. And they're like, what? The base of that tea is an oolong tea. And they're like, what's an oolong tea? And I'm like,
There we go.
Yeah.
Base. If we incorporate in the concept of having a tea base and what that base is, because that's really the problem for me with the lowest quality tea beverages, is their tea base is garbage.
yeah, like literally garbage. No, it's just not very good.
No, just tea dust.
Tea dust, yeah.
Because like Arizona green tea, it tastes nothing. Have you ever had a green tea that tastes anything like whatever is in that?
Never ever. It's just corn syrup.
Yeah, and it has the characters for Liu Cha right on it, right? Like they're really small, but it says like green tea in Chinese. Again, you're saying the problem for you is when you talk to people about tea, they try and associate it. And if you say green tea, they already have an idea of what green tea is based on these mass teas like Arizona and in the US, but no actual concept for what a whole leaf green tea tastes like.
Right. And like I remember my first experience having an actual tea that was unsweetened, unflavored, just tea, and it actually came out of a can from a Japanese vending machine when I was like 14, town outside of Tokyo, right by Mount Fuji, and I had it and I was like, this tastes entirely different from everything I've ever thought about tea as. And it was just literally just pure tea.
The language of pure is hard too because it is truly a pure tea, but there's also a bit of an ego, right? When you say pure, that like there's this association with like better. I wouldn't be surprised if we had tea beverages with higher quality bases. If people were drinking more of those and they were more available on the consumer market in everywhere, right? Like in gas stations, in Walmart, there would be more people who would be willing to buy into gongfu tea if their association wasn't so far off from what we think of as slow gongfu tea.
I do actually remember having a really nice milk tea recently. A Chinese friend was like, "Oh, you like tea? Here's a really nice milk tea." And it was actually with the green tea jasmine pearls in it, and it tasted great. The flavor came through.
I remember that one time in your apartment. It was actually when we were doing those Instagram lives for Wonder River Tea. We had that jasmine green tea that was better than anything I've ever tasted in the West in terms of like fast tea.
Was it fast tea?
No. We drank it. You had it loose.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was the jasmine pearls, right?
Yeah, it was the jasmine pearls for sure.
Yeah, and so that was the exact flavor I got out of this milk tea, and it just shone right through it. I was like, oh, that was pleasant. It was nice.
I feel like that's really the same for every industry, though. The closer you get to mass production, the further you get from the taste of the pure item, whatever it is. But I think there's an opportunity because Arizona tea has only been around for 29 years, and yet every single person in America knows about it.
And that's true. So there is the opportunity for more recognition, but at the same time, if you have to change and dilute it so far that it's a misrepresentation and a negative representation even, like it's like, I know no publicity is bad publicity, but it gives me a lot more work on the back end, getting people back into pure tea.
But I think it goes both ways. The more that specialty tea grows, the more that gongfu and small pot tea grows and that culture grows, I think those industries will play on each other more. And so we'll have more questions from people of like, why doesn't this taste like that? Some of it will be natural and some of it will need to be, I think, education-based. But I think either way, if more people are making higher quality mass-produced tea, I think it's an opportunity, not a detriment.
Yeah, I guess I'm still on the back end of it for the industry side of things, where Chinese green tea is incredible, but it's also very expensive because of the domestic market. And then the tea that gets exported into the West is the very lowest tier green tea. And then the perception of the West, for a lot of the West, for green tea is that it's very cheap, but it's quite in fact the opposite. And then people message me all the time like, why are your green teas so expensive? And I'm like, it's just more work on my side.
I'd be curious to have this conversation again in 10, 15 years, because even compared to 5-10 years ago, there's a lot more people selling loose leaf tea for like gongfu consumption.
That's for sure. And I guess that brings up a good point where everyone who's doing this industry is doing the industry a service. Everyone who's in the industry, everyone who's selling any type of tea, it's just making it more popular. And so I guess that is a fair point where even the Arizona tea gets people thinking about tea.
And honestly, I mean, for everything being online, right, in the algorithm, the more that the term tea is used, the better. And the more that we can get people who are doing gongfu tea or a small pot style, an experience style tea in front of people, the more their perception will change. And that's a benefit we didn't have 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's very true. We live in a different age now.
The last thing I want to talk about is kombucha, right, which most often uses a tea base and is speculated to have originated in China, even though there's not a specific origin point that a lot of people can attribute. And I think it just goes to that fact there's always going to be a trickle down, right? There's always going to be a trickle down from those high quality or most pure versions to the different, subsets or subsequent styles.
Yeah, I think kombucha is very interesting because in Chinese it's jun cha, and jun is germ, so it's like germ tea. Yeah. And I think the kombucha either comes from the Korean or Japanese transliteration of it or translation of it. And so I do believe it has its origins in this general area. And I know that in the 90s it became really popular, and a lot of Chinese people think like, oh, the kombucha is just this crazy fad the old people were drinking in the 90s. But it does have the tea base. It does have usually a red tea base, but you can buy it on Taobao here, and they just send you the lowest quality, smallest amount of red tea to make it with.
Did we get our scoop from you when we were in China?
Probably. I have my scoops right here. You want to see them? Never pass up an opportunity to show off your scobies.
There. Ooh, yes.
Big
nice
boys.
And thick. Big boys, yes.
Like you said, you can just grow it here, you can buy it here. And I think it just grows itself, and I gave some to you, I think, along with all the tea.
Yeah, lots and lots of tea. But the tea that I've been sipping on this week has been our Moonstone. I've been tearing up the Moonstone for the YouTube video, but also just because I love Shomei so much.
You're liking that green Shomei, huh?
Yeah, if you want to hear a little bit about the difference between green and brown shumei, again, you can check out that video where I talk a little bit about it. But if you want to hear more about it, you can go check out the One River Tea podcast as well.
The green shumei is still not very common in China. Like fresh green shumei, you don't really see people drinking that.
Honestly, I didn't love it until we pressed it. Like when we had the loose stuff that you sent, I was like, it's just too green, too vegetal.
Pressing changes a lot.
If you tuned into this video and you've never had Gongfu tea before, check out this video right here, which is going to go over 10 essential terms for tea drinkers, including some of these new terms for Gongfu or highly skilled tea, like the tea that Derek and I are drinking today. Peace.